Hello, I'm Kent Myers.
I'm Mick Cornett, and it's time for The Verdict. As a part of its traditional and continuing commitment to public and community service, Crowe and Dunleavy Law Firm presents The Verdict, an objective discussion of contemporary legal issues hosted by Kent Myers, and also brought to you by a friend of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children and Delta Dental Plan of Oklahoma. And welcome to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett. Thanks for joining us, and as always, I am joined by Kent Myers, who is one of Oklahoma's top legal experts. Kent, how would you describe today's show?
Today's show is going to focus on smoking, on tobacco. There are some extraordinary new initiatives being proposed by several state government agencies that would have a dramatic impact on the smoker and perhaps the non-smoker as well. We're going to actually, Mick, try to divide this up into two shows. These initiatives are too wide-ranging to cover completely in one show, and we want our viewers to know an awful lot more about it than we can do in one show, so we've asked our guests already to come back for a second show, and they've agreed. Today, principally, we're going to be talking about one of the major aspects of this, and that is to the smoker, an additional tax, a tax of $1 per pack on cigarettes, which would raise Oklahoma's tax from 23 cents per pack to $1.23 per pack, and make Oklahoma one of the largest taxing states on smoking in the United States. We'll be talking about who are the smokers, who will be paying this tax, is it fairly proportioned, and will it accomplish the purposes that the proponents seek to accomplish.
And we'll have a couple of experts joining us on the show. It's an idea designed, that, among other things, to discourage Oklahomans from buying cigarettes. But it is not without controversy. It should be a lively show. You're watching The Verdict with Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
In Oklahoma, there are more than 1,600 children waiting to be adopted. They're of all ages, and for many, home has been a source of pain and conflict. They've dreamed of finding a better life and a loving family. Consider adoption. For more information, call 1-877-OK-SWIFT or visit the website www.okdhs.org. Adopt. It may be the toughest job you'll ever love.
I wasn't going to school because I was hanging with the wrong crowd. And one day, I was put into juvie for 2 stolen cars, robbery of a house, and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. When I was locked up, that's when I really realized that, it wasn't for me. Like, I was only in there 2 months, but to me, that was enough. It'd be better for me to stay in school, just get my education. I think I'm happier now. I know I'm happier now.
St. Gregory's University has been changing the lives of people like me for 125 years. Affordable, private Catholic education, balanced with dedication to community and service, makes St. Gregory special. We're extremely proud of our students' outstanding academic achievements and our nationally ranked athletic teams. It's when you help a student build a future of balance, integrity, and service that you change a life forever. St. Gregory's, a community for life.
Honey, would you get me some ice cream?
Ice cream.
Please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Some things you just can't do without. It happens every night, all across America.
And welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, who is going to introduce our guests.
Today, viewers, we have two very well qualified guests. On my right is Dr. Leslie Beitsch, the Commissioner of the Oklahoma Department of Health, who he has been in that position about 6 months, I believe. His educational background is that he has an MD degree from Georgetown University and a JD or law degree from Harvard Law School. So you're both a doctor and a lawyer.
Yes, sir.
Create some kind of love-hate relationship, I'm sure, within yourself, but we'll overlook that. On my left is Michael Thornbrugh. Michael Thornbrugh is a former Republican member of the House of Representatives from the Tulsa area for about 8 years, and now is the manager of government and public affairs for Quik Corporation. A little bit for our viewers about Quik. Quik has about 370 stores in 9 states and is the largest privately held corporation in Oklahoma with approaching $3 billion in sales, much of which I'm sure is cigarettes. Michael, glad to have you.
Thank you very much.
We're here today, gentlemen, to talk about a wide-ranging initiative, at least open that up, and then subsequently to focus on the cigarette tax. But Dr. Beitsch, please tell our viewers what is the initiative that you and other agencies are proposing?
Thank you, Kent. The first thing is we have a 4-part initiative, and I know we're going to focus today on the tobacco user fee, I call it. But our department, along with the Oklahoma Health Care Authority, the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, and the ABLE Commission, have teamed together to look at health issues related to tobacco. Unfortunately, Oklahomans do not enjoy the sort of robust health that some of our neighboring states do. And as a relatively new health commissioner, I met with lots of colleagues to try and determine what it is that really centered behind Oklahomans not enjoying the kind of health they could. And what it amounted to, and perhaps this is a good time, Kent, to show a graphic.
Yeah, let's look at a graphic we've got.
If we looked at deaths caused by tobacco and other causes, we see that deaths due to smoking actually are greater than the deaths from AIDS, alcohol, car crashes, fires, homicides, other causes of drugs, and suicide all combined. And so if you're a health commissioner, you're trying to figure out how do you make a state healthy, you begin to focus on tobacco as one of those leading causes. And we came up with a 4-pronged strategy, just briefly. One, the tobacco user fee of $1 per pack. And that's for 2 reasons. One, to discourage use of tobacco products. And 2, to fund some of the impact of tobacco. And perhaps we can get into that in just a few moments. Secondly, clean indoor air, reducing the use of tobacco in public places to reduce secondhand smoke among people who are not smoking cigarettes.
So this would impact not only the smoker but the non-smoker as well.
That is our intent.
Okay, please go ahead.
3 is the issue of preemption, allowing local communities to determine how they want tobacco used in their communities. There are 38,000 cities, towns, and counties in the United States. There are only 50 states, and the tobacco industry has focused on state capitals as a way to limit the sort of governance that communities can have over use of tobacco where people actually live and make those decisions. We feel local communities are better situated to make those decisions themselves. And 4th, compliance issues. Right now, convenience stores and retail outlets that sell tobacco, we're able to check them only occasionally. There are 5,500 to 6,000 retail outlets selling tobacco. We do 1,000 compliance checks. The optimal number would be 2 per facility each year, or about 11,000. So we're looking for resources to change that. I'd like to comment that Mr. Thornbrugh represents Quik, who's done an outstanding job on compliance issues. They've been very good corporate citizens, 100% compliance checks on their facilities statewide, and they identify all purchasers of cigarette and tobacco products. We commend that.
Dr. Beitsch, let me ask you, whose idea was this at the outset to put, well, let's focus on the user fee. Was it your department or someone else's idea for Oklahoma to enact a larger user fee?
I think, Kent, there were a lot of discussions taking place between our Board of Health, who were looking to really make significant policy changes, the Oklahoma Health Care Authority, who, if you've been reading the newspapers lately, they're in a spending deficit, and one of the reasons is increased demand for services. Many of those services that are being purchased are caused by smoking-related illness. And so combining that with our interest in trying to limit smoking to people, particularly kids in general, it was a natural sort of combination.
Mike, let me ask you, what is your initial reaction to the proposal in general and the $1 per pack increase in the price of a pack of cigarettes in particular?
Well, I think it's important to point out that this is an initiative that is not brought by the people, and it's certainly not an initiative that's brought by the elected officials. So you have 3 or 4 different governmental agencies who decided they want to make this their point which they can. Obviously, every retailer in Oklahoma is going to be opposed to it, with the exception of those who are tribes, who really have a tremendous...
The Indian tribes, the smoke shops.
You bet. It's important to understand that Oklahoma, all but 40 square miles, is considered Indian territory, which means that a tribe who's federally recognized, which Oklahoma has around 45 or 6, can go anywhere they want. And people need to understand that there is a really disadvantage in the taxation. For example, the tribes will only pay 25% of what any other business will pay, and a proposal that they have, I don't know anybody who's for a 500% tax increase. Is roughly where it is. And then when you compare it to Oklahoma business versus the Indian retailers, tremendous disadvantage, tremendous.
What do you think about the likelihood of success in bringing down a smoking rate with this kind of a tax?
I understand where they're coming from, but it just won't happen. What it will do, quite frankly, the tribes have roughly 32% of the business right now, and if you enact a 500% tax increase, you're not going to stop smoking. What you are going to do is you're going to take that business from retailers and you're going to send it to the smoke shops, you're going to send it to internet sales, military installations, and cross borders. So what will happen is the state will lose revenue. Not only will it affect the excise tax they collect on tobacco, but sales tax, payroll tax, property tax, you name it. So they may be looking at something where they're going to have a huge deficit.
Hold that thought. I've got to interrupt and get us to a short break. We're discussing a proposed increase in the price of cigarettes. How would it affect you? How would it affect Oklahoma? You're watching The Verdict.
Yeah, campfire's a lot of fun. You get to make some friends. You get to do some cool stuff. Campfire's for boys too, not just girls. But hey, campfire's definitely for kids. So call the campfire office nearest you to join in on the fun. 'Cause let's face it, you're not getting any younger.
And Blankenship has stopped at the line of scrimmage. No gain on the play. Leaving it 4th and 7 on the Tiger 46-yard line. 38 seconds on the clock. The Tigers have no choice but to go. Wiggins had to do the kicking. Here's the snap. And the kick is away.
Look at me.
At me.
At me.
At me.
At me.
Just someone from Noble.
Hydro.
Oklahoma City.
Winoka.
Lawton, Oklahoma.
Oklahoma State University saw.
A leader.
A reporter.
A pilot.
A road scholar.
A trader.
Who's inside of you?
Come discover yourself at
OSU.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, Michael Thornbrugh, Dr. Leslie Beitsch. We're discussing a proposal that would raise the price of cigarettes $1 per pack. Kent?
Yes. Dr. Beitsch, let me ask you what is perhaps an obvious question, but I understand smoking to be an addiction. I'm a non-smoker myself, but I understand that it is an addiction. Is it reasonable to assume that just simply raising the price of the cigarette is going to make the addicted smoker smoke less?
That's a great question, and we have data from a lot of other states that have enacted tax increases that when the price of tobacco products goes up, overall smoking goes down. It goes down in smokers consuming fewer cigarettes and fewer smokers beginning. Not to overwhelm you with numbers, but on average, when the price of a product goes up 10%, overall 4% of the population decreases in their smoking habits. But with kids, it's even more impressive. So if we increase the price of tobacco, cigarettes, in Oklahoma, conservatively, 30% fewer kids will smoke. That translates into 20,000 fewer kids dying prematurely from tobacco-related illness.
Michael, what do you think about that?
Well, I disagree with the numbers. What happens statistically is when you have a tax increase, what you see is you see less revenues, and no one really has a way to track it because of things that I mentioned on the cross-border sales, the internet sales, and the various smoke shops. We agree it's been against the law since 1907 to sell tobacco to minors, and I appreciate your kind words about our company and our 100% compliance. I think what you see is education is the key on this, and it appears that it's working. I mean, you can cite a lot of different statistics, and one I just recently read from University of Michigan is since the 1990s, for certain grade levels, I believe it was 6, 8, 10, and 12, I'm not 100% sure, it declined anywhere from 12 to 15%. And you have to look very carefully at the different definitions that are used, whereas a smoker under the definition is if you've taken a puff of a cigarette in the last 30 days. But we agree with you 100% that children should not get tobacco, and I think you find that the overwhelming retailers out there are very, very responsible, and they take it very, very seriously. So we're pleased to join hands on finding ways to get tobacco away from children.
Michael, you're a former state legislator.
Yes, sir.
How much of an impact do the tobacco lobbyists have at the state legislative level?
Oh, they're like any other group. Obviously, there are some very capable people out there. But in regards, it's just not going to be tobacco lobbyists on this. Again, I don't work for a manufacturer. I work for a retailer. And the average convenience store, if you will, their sales are roughly 30 to 40% responsible selling of tobacco. And when you have such a disparity, which they're talking about, guys, you're going to have an awful lot of retailers that are going to be struggling. It's just not the excise tax. I mean, again, I hate to be repetitive, but it's sales tax, it's licensing fees, it's property tax, and on down the road. And you're going to find a lot of retailers like myself who are going to be out there and oppose it.
Doctor, let me ask you, how would you propose, if at all, to address the end run on this user fee by buying cigarettes over the internet?
Well, if I may, I want to respond to a couple things.
Certainly.
Perhaps.
Please go ahead.
Mr. Thornbrugh said, first of all, when we look just at education, and I thoroughly agree, we want to work on limiting tobacco among kids who are purchasing that product illegally. The tobacco industry is spending $100 million each year in Oklahoma promoting their product. That's 50% more than they spent before we actually initiated a multi-state tobacco lawsuit. Oklahoma already charges less than, well, right around half the national average for taxes. Taxes are higher in some surrounding states. We're not losing tobacco revenue necessarily to other states. We do have issues of tribal sovereignty that we need to address. And in fact, we've been looking into that issue, working with tribal government to actually level the playing field for the tax burden so that people could not forum shop where to buy tobacco products. Internet sales, cross-border sales, smuggling, those are overplayed by the tobacco industry itself. And in fact, tobacco executives have been accused in several lawsuits of actually taking an active role in smuggling. We think there's clearly an enforcement role that can limit that. There's no question kids can't afford tobacco products. Their income elasticity does not support rising prices, and that's where we can have a dramatic impact on kids.
Let me ask you a different question. California raised its tax by 50 cents a pack a couple of years ago. Is there any data on what effect that had?
Thank you for asking that question. There's terrific data from California. California in 1988 began a process of raising their taxes on tobacco. And what we've seen over the last several years is that deaths due to lung cancer, lung disease, and cardiovascular disease have all declined in California dramatically compared to the rest of the United States, and Oklahoma in particular.
Mike, what do you think?
Is that what's going to happen here?
Well, again, you got to go back. Oklahoma is truly a unique state, and you hate to harp on the Native American issue, but it's going to overplay everything here. When you have the entire state of Oklahoma, again, except a real small sliver in the panhandle, that can be considered Indian territory, the retailers like myself and others, $1 a pack increase, a 500% tax increase, is going to really devastate a lot of responsible retailers like myself and others. And we truly believe it's not going to enhance one thing to the revenue picture. In fact, as I understand it, there's a shortfall right now. With the enactment of this proposed thing, it's going to be further.
What kind of impact on revenue would you anticipate having? Would this have a positive or negative impact on state revenue?
On state revenue, well, there are right now, this past year, actually data for year 2000, 367 million packs of cigarettes sold in Oklahoma. If we raise the tax $1, conservatively, we're estimating that we'd see an increase in revenue of about $200 million. New York, Massachusetts, California all saw 10% increases in revenue approximately when they raised taxes, which seems to fly really in the face of the argument that we just heard. But people who are taxed are getting something for their money. What they're getting is the opportunity to get smoking cessation classes. They're paying for what they're using. We increase the cost of smoking-related illnesses and Medicaid. Somebody's got to pay for that. And for Medicare.
Now, Ken, I think it'd be a good idea to let both of our guests sum up their opinions on this subject. Mr. Thornbrugh, why don't we start with you? 45 seconds to a minute on this issue.
Again, I appreciate it, the invitation for retailers to be heard. It would be hard-pressed to argue against it if the tax was equal and across the board. And hopefully your viewers understand you really have a different taxation system in Oklahoma. And it just doesn't affect the excise tax. When you're talking about it's going to affect payroll, it's going to affect sales tax, excise tax, licensing fees, etc. I respectfully disagree that the state of Oklahoma, because of uniqueness, won't gain any money from revenue on this. In fact, they're going to lose money. And being a retailer who operates in a lot of different border communities, we don't need statistics to show us that. We can tell you by proof in the 43 years in business. So hopefully we'll have the opportunity to continue to educate the public. And obviously, we're going to have the opportunity to educate our public servants. And
Dr. Beitsch, how would you sum up your feelings on that?
I think we can actually create a level playing field, and I think with the cooperation of tribal governments, we can construct a win-win process. But this issue is not about economics. It's about health. It's about the health of our children, who we're trying to protect from the ravages that tobacco causes when they are smoking prematurely before they're age 18, or when they're the victims of secondhand smoke, which is the third leading cause of preventable death in Oklahoma. We're talking about paying for smoking-related illnesses. Tobacco right now is getting a free ride. Oklahomans pay approximately half the national tax burden for cigarette taxes. We can do a better job. We can actually raise revenue.
We're going to wrap it up there. Dr. Beitsch, Mr. Thornbrugh, thank you both for coming by. We'll have to do another show on this subject in the future. Kent and I'll be back with a few final thoughts when we get back. This is The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers.
Young, who got some good minutes in the first half, hits the jumper. Tiffany Young, a junior from Hillsboro, Alabama, has 4. Young, 17-footer, got it. And Tiffany Young with a sensational performance.
Did you see me hit the ball, Dad?
Sometimes.
Look at the camera, son.
Between this
Smile, honey.
Keys.
and this,
You open this door right now.
Go away. Just leave me alone. What is wrong?
even the best kids can use some help.
Why won't you talk to me?
This is where we come in. Youth Services, giving teens a place to turn.
Boy Scouts of America, where above all else, character counts.
When you mentor a child, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be yourself, which, by the way, is pretty good. Do good. Mentor a child. Call 1-877-BE-A-MENTOR.
And we are back on The Verdict to wrap this one up. Kent, some final thoughts.
It's an interesting and difficult subject. We're talking about an activity, smoking, that is lawful. If you're above the right age, it's lawful to do it and has been for a long time. But it's also an activity that apparently many medical people recognize as being very harmful. So what do you do about something that's lawful and apparently harmful? Do you try to tax it out of existence? Do you enact what some would call a sin tax on it? That's what's being proposed by these state agencies. There is some evidence that this kind of increased taxation can result in a diminution of smoking, both in the adult and the young adult and child populations. I think it remains to be seen what actually is accomplished. The thing that I want our viewers to recognize and to understand is that we're going to bring these two guests back to discuss the other aspects of this proposal. It's not simply a proposal to enact an additional tax, but to do other things, and we'll do that next week. But what we do want to do with our viewers is ask them to get on our website, www.theverdict.tv, and tell us what they think, not only voting about whether we ought to enact this $1-a-pack tax or not, but tell us in a comment what they think.
Or they can give us an idea for another show.
We'd love to have their thoughts.
For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next time on The Verdict. This program was brought to you by Crow and Dunlevy, a professional corporation. And also brought to you by a friend of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children and Delta Dental Plan of Oklahoma.